Hi there, and thanks for joining us today for this session about SASE and Zero Trust Security. My name is Matt Wells from Innovecom, and I'm going to spend the next 10 to 15 minutes introducing you to these concepts and provide some quick ideas on some quick wins to get you going. So to begin with, I'd just like to provide a little context. So working in technology, we're used to the constant changes and, well, let's be honest, for most of us, the fact that there's always something new to learn is a big part of what makes working with technology so rewarding. Over the last 5 years or so, the rapid acceleration of new services delivered in the cloud and at an appealing price point has fueled an accelerated new rate of change and allowed all organisations, from massive multinational corporations to micro businesses launched from the spare bedroom, to all have access to the same set of functionality. And this has been amazing for our startup and scale-up businesses in particular. And of course, in 2020, the coronavirus pandemic, which has accelerated changes to the way that people work and the locations in which they work from to a whole new level that we've never seen before. Okay, so if we look back on the traditional way we deployed and ran our infrastructure and applications, we used to have a centralized business space. And in that space, we would have all our critical infrastructure onto which we would install our business applications. And our people would access the applications from the desktop PC that was hardwired to the network at their desk. Connectivity to the outside world was usually limited to the internet, which was just used for browsing and email. In fact, this browsing and email would have accounted for less than 20% of most organisations' overall network traffic, with the other 80% being internal only traffic. And so all we needed was a stack of security appliances at the perimeter to manage and secure our use of the internet. Now, of course, we had roaming users on laptops, but they would often connect back to the office using a VPN. Then, along with other locations like branch offices that connected back to the head office using MPLS or VPN technology, they would all use that one internet connection and that one security stack to protect the entire business. And with the changes over the last 5 years, we have seen the introduction of new types of locations such as factories and other IoT hubs and devices. We've also seen much of our critical infrastructure move to hosted private cloud providers or hyperscalers such as AWS. And many of our business applications have been moved to the cloud. Now, for someone like me who first worked on Microsoft Mail and then Exchange Server 4 back in the 90s, it's almost sad to think that no one really considers having an internally hosted email system anymore. But anyway, the idea of routing all traffic through the corporate headquarters and out through the one internet connection and security stack is no longer practical, as it inevitably leads to bottlenecks and poor performance and kills the user experience. So now, our users expect to be able to access what they need from wherever they are. Now, these changes are of course possible because of the massive improvements that have been made to our access to bandwidth through home and mobile broadband. And so that now the trend is reversed, and for most organisations, less than 20% of their traffic is now internal. So this direct internet access from anywhere means that most of our network traffic isn't protected by the security stack at the office perimeter, and this is recognised by the producers of malware. I mean, today, around 68% of all compromised attacks were at the branch office or with roaming users. And so, as the way we work has changed, we now need to ensure that the way we secure our businesses changes too. What is SASE, or SASE as it's pronounced? So firstly, it's important to point out that SASE is a concept, it's not a product. So the Secure Access Service Edge, or SASE, is a term that is now recognised by Gartner. Now, a good definition of SASE is the convergence of networking and security services, including Secure Web Gateway, Cloud Access Security Broker, DNS protection, Firewall as a Service, software-defined wide area networks, and zero trust access. Now, all these services should then be cloud native and aggregated to provide a consistent policy enforcement and visibility. And one recent study showed that 93% of respondents stated that a move to the cloud for their security services had increased their efficiency. We haven't got time today to go into details of the complete SASE solution, but we're going to concentrate on one of the areas, that being zero trust access. Okay, so there are a number of critical elements that contribute to zero trust access or zero trust security, and these are to verify identity, to verify the device, to protect your data, to harden the application, protect your infrastructure, and govern networks. Now, all of this should be with a policy-driven access and automated threat detection and response. Now, that's an awful lot of critical elements to consider. So how do we even begin to pull this together into a strategy? So here's how it could work. So if we start with the user, then we need to verify their identity. So it's about knowing who is requesting access, and that identity must be validated explicitly and not inferred. We then need to verify the device. And so all data access requests result in the transfer of that data to a browser or an app on a device, and knowing the state of that device is critical in a world where devices can be infected or lost or stolen. We need to consider how to protect our data. So wherever possible, data should be protected from unauthorized transfer by automatic classification and encryption to protect against intentional or accidental data loss. We need to harden our applications. So access to applications and their configuration must be secured to mitigate against the intrinsic risk within an application, and we need to ensure that all access is governed by a policy. We need to protect our infrastructure. So whether we're using cloud workloads like infrastructure as a service or platform as a service or internal systems, we need to ensure that we're utilizing connectivity in accordance with the very best security principles. And finally, we need to govern our networks. So we need to mitigate the lateral movement of data by using intelligent and adaptive segmentation to compartmentalize workloads and provide monitoring and protection against anomalous traffic patterns. Policy-driven access is fundamental to this. So modern micro-segmentation means more than just networks. It requires us to also gate access based upon the user's role, their location, behavior patterns, data sensitivity, the client application, and the device's security. And we must ensure that all policy is automatically enforced at the time of access and continuously throughout the session wherever possible. So we also need to incorporate automatic threat detection and response, and couple that with telemetry from all the system areas. So that must be processed together and then acted on automatically. Attacks will happen at cloud speed, so our defense systems must act at cloud speed as well, and humans just can't react quickly enough. So we must integrate threat intelligence with our organization's security policy and the telemetry data to provide continuous real-time evaluation for consistent policy-based and real-time protection. Of course, we then need to continually observe and optimize and orchestrate our response and improvements. So all of that sounds great, and you're probably thinking that if you had the time and the budget to buy a heap of products and get them all integrated, then in about 2 years' time you'll have finished a program of work to get you where you need to be. So you won't be surprised to hear me tell you that it doesn't need to be that way. So I want to try and break this down a little and share with you a few simple steps to get going quickly and achieve some tangible improvements. So to get started with Zero Trust, we suggest to focus on just 3 pillars. So number 1 is the trusted user. So it's about securing users as they access applications with strong authentication. Number 2 is trusted devices. Secure all connections into your applications. And number 3 is about the application. So try to make the user experience consistent for all your applications. And we can make huge strides forward in getting these controls in place by deploying a single solution. It's called Duo and it's from Cisco. So if we go back to these 3 pillars, the first thing that Duo allows us to do is to establish very, very quickly, is the user who they say they are? We do that with multi-factor authentication or strong authentication that allows us to verify in a way that's completely out of band, and ideally using a biometric where possible, that the identity of the user is that person who they say they are. Now, we all know that MFA has been around for 25, 30 years now, and for a long time it was done with those tokens we all used to carry around on our key rings. But that wasn't really strong authentication. If you left the token on your desk, anybody could pick it up, and even though we added a static 4-digit PIN that only the user would know, it's not completely foolproof. So maybe they could impersonate you and there would be nothing we would know about it. You may also remember back in 2011 when RSA got attacked and the shared seed of those tokens got stolen. So every single one of those physical tokens on the entire planet was invalidated if it came from RSA. So then we moved over to soft tokens, which weren't really more secure. They were just easier to replace if they got breached. We needed to have a better way. And now, in the modern world, tokens like push notifications and universal two-factor and web authentication provide asymmetric and other much more secure methods of verifying our users. But even that's not enough, because even if the user is exactly who they say they are, if they're coming in using a device that we can't identify and therefore can't be certain that we can trust, then we really still shouldn't let them in, because it's the device that could be acting against us, even if the user has no idea. So we need to verify our devices. And you might be saying to yourself, well, we've got MDM. We're good to go. And yes, MDM is an important part of any security solution, but there's a gap. And that gap is personal devices. You may say that, well, we've got a policy against that. Users aren't allowed to use personal devices, but if you're like we are, and a lot of other organisations are this year, working from home, the reality is that your users are using personal devices. So the question is, how are we detecting them? And how are we making sure that they are up to date with patching and antivirus, etc., whilst we allow our users to work with as little friction as possible? So we need to be able to plug that gap. And that's what Cisco Duo does with its device health application. And finally, there's the question of where do we do these checks? Both MFA and host checks like Network Access Control or NAC have been around for a fair amount of time in some form or another, and probably most commonly on remote access VPNs. But the problem there is it's a one-size-fits-all policy. And we end up in a situation where we've got the one chance to look at the user and device combination when they connect to the network. And we've got a single policy that is almost undoubtedly too strict for some of our less sensitive applications like the staff cafeteria menu or booking a parking space, but not really strict enough for the really important stuff like the HR database or financial data or things like that. So we need to be more granular about it. We need to be able to apply security checks that are appropriate to the specific context in question. So if you're booking a parking space, you don't need to be put through the same level of scrutiny as you would to access the HR database. And that actually makes life more secure, but it also makes life better for the user, because it means that a lot of onerous checks that aren't necessary on non-sensitive items simply don't need to happen anymore. And it gives us a level of control that we didn't have before. So the goal for us to achieve that last bit of the 3-pillar system is to set up a service where we check our user against the user directory. We identify who they are. And we then enforce strong multi-factor authentication and role-based access policies to determine what should that user be able to do based upon who they are. We then look against the device inventory to assess, is that a corporate device? Do we manage the device? Or is that a personal device? We also want to check the device's security posture, because whether it's corporate or personal, if it's not up to date and it doesn't meet our posture requirements, we really shouldn't let it in. And then, in combining all three of those bits of information, we can then apply policy in the cloud. As part of a SASE framework, it's really important for us that we do that in the cloud. Okay, so there are other solutions that you could use to do this. I mean, you could have Windows servers running the MPS server role all over the place across your network. But that would be a real pain to manage. Doing it in the cloud makes a huge difference in terms of ease of use and management. So we assess the combination of user, device and device posture in the cloud. And then we dynamically apply our policy, and then we decide which applications you're going to get access to and apply the specific policies for those applications to our users and their devices. Now, many of you listening may be thinking, well, we're already doing some of this. We don't want to rip out what we already have and start over. So it's always been important for us at Innovecom to meet our customers where they are now. So to help with that, Cisco have broken this down into 5 different phases of how you can approach Zero Trust. And in this approach, you can get value from every single phase. And the first step is something that you can get value from in as little as 5 minutes. And I know it sounds too good to be true, but it isn't. There are already plugins for things like Windows Logon, Active Directory, Azure AD, Microsoft 365, along with loads of other vendors, solutions and platforms, and that you literally just drop in a set of API keys and you have strong authentication. It's as easy as that, and you can verify the identity of your users and make sure that they are who they say they are, up to and including biometric authentication really, really quickly. And that's a great place to start if you've not got multi-factor authentication in place anywhere. And it's really fast, and it can be achieved using the first product level, which is simply called Duo MFA. Now, as soon as you start with phase 1, you're going to start to see all the devices that are accessing your applications, because Duo sits in front of all your applications that you're protecting. It's going to take an inventory of all those devices that are coming into those applications. And what always happens next is that customers start to see devices that they weren't expecting accessing their applications. And this visibility usually then prompts the question, what can I do about it? So we want to enforce contextual access policies. We want to be able to say, okay, now I see that device, what's okay and what's not okay, what's allowed, what's not allowed. You'll notice there's a second product level of Duo on the left called Duo Access. And its goal is to take your strong authentication beyond just the user and start looking at those devices, regardless of whether they're personal or corporate. It doesn't matter. It's all about what's the posture we want to see on our devices. But then there's the question of, even if they're in good posture, if it's a personal device, maybe we don't want to let them access our really sensitive data. So we might want to link into, say, the Active Directory domain or an MDM solution, so we can actually identify and certify the corporate devices. So what we want to do is inspect those devices for trust and control and apply management. And finally, we want to apply all those policies to secure each application individually. The Cisco Duo Beyond product level allows us to achieve all of this. Now, Cisco have conducted some basic research by asking people to honestly assess where they are on their journey through the maturity model. And as you can see, about a third think that they've done at least something in relation to MFA. If you add up the next 2 steps, about 22% have done something around device control. And then the numbers really start to tail off. And this is because zero trust as a concept is relatively new. Not many organisations have really bought into that application level control. A lot of organisations are still stuck at that one-size-fits-all policy on the VPN, and that's where the biggest opportunity for progress is at the moment. Now, I'm sure some of you will have noticed that those numbers don't add up to 100%, and that's because, believe it or not, about 32% of people Cisco talk to haven't started this journey at all. They're still just using username and password challenge response combinations. So there's a huge opportunity to easily achieve significantly better protection for our organisations against even the most basic of threats like credential phishing and theft. So, to wrap up, I just want to spend a couple of minutes talking about next steps. First thing you can do is to contact us to request a free trial for Cisco Duo and some assistance to get it up and running. We'd also be happy to help you investigate other SASE elements such as Secure Web Gateway, DNS protection and Firewall as a Service. And we can provide trial licenses and assistance for many of these other solutions too. You could also consider how to expand zero trust throughout your entire estate, including integration with the infrastructure and network. Integration with fabrics such as Cisco ACI and VMware NSX can provide consistent user device integration into a micro-segmentation strategy, whether on-premise, in the cloud, or in a hybrid multi-cloud configuration. You may also be considering how to achieve zero trust in a machine-to-machine situation and how that authentication would work within cloud-native applications, maybe by deploying a service mesh and using tools from vendors such as HashiCorp. And Innovecom provide a wide range of assessments and services within our Observe, Optimize and Orchestrate methodology. So, if you're interested in learning more about SASE, Zero Trust Security, or any of our other services, please reach out to me today to arrange a consultation to discuss your next steps. All that remains now is for me to thank Cisco, who sponsored this webinar, and to thank you for listening.